everybody, welcome. Dr. Ray here, and today we're going to talk about articulate storyline triggers. I haven't done one of these live videos in quite a while, so these learning live videos, but I'm going to start doing them again. Basically, whenever I feel like doing something, I do one. So anyway, today we're in Articulate Storyline 360, and we are going to talk about triggers. I've been doing a lot of projects recently where I've been basically my role in the projects has been like figuring out the hard things that we're having problems with Articulate doing. Like we have developers, they're doing a lot of like the simple, like entering in the graphics, buttons, and all that kind of stuff, making it look nice and pretty. But we run into problems where we like have to create like a timer, or we have to just create something that's really challenging, like I don't know, getting like scores to work or submit in different ways, just things like like that I've run into with my clients. And so basically, what I'm doing is just kind of go over some of that stuff with you because I think it's important. And the interesting thing about the triggers in Articulate Storyline are that it's really programming logic, so I like that. Um, I do get annoyed with Articulate because a lot of times I try to do stuff and it just doesn't do it. But because I feel like the triggers are like a very easy way to program, but they're not programmed. Because if I can program, like I used to be able to do it when Flash was the popular e-learning tool, I could do anything I wanted. But in Articulate, I'm pretty limited in what I can do. So let's take a look at the triggers. I want to go through, talk about some of the actions and some of the programming. To kind of talk about like, if you're starting out and learning like, how do you, I don't understand programming or something like that, what these really do. Because they open up the functionality of Articulate quite a bit, even though they are limited in themselves. All right, so let's go in. Let's take a look. So basically what I have here is I just have a blank storyline file. You can see, I just started a new slide. And you can see already there are some, on the right-hand side here are your triggers. You can see I have some player triggers. Now these are for the player, assuming I used the player when I published my file. You can see this jump next slide when user clicks or swipes next. That's the next button. Okay, so let's go in. Let's actually click on my slide and let's go in and check out the different triggers and their actions and like what these things, like how do you work with these and stuff like that. All right, so the first thing you do is you have to want to do something. So a lot of times, like it's like, my developers come to me when they're like, hey, we need to do this thing. One of the last few things I did, the last two big things I had to do was A, I had to create a timer in Articulate. And the other thing I had to do was get a percentage score and have that score submit before the results slot. So, little things like that I have to figure out. And I have to say, like, when timer ends, go to the next slide or something like that. So how do you do all that kind of stuff? You use these triggers. And basically what you have to do is you do have to understand programming logic a little bit, which is kind of what I'm going through as I go through these to show you them. But just to show you how how programming in general works and how the triggers work, there's an action, there's a place where it happens, when does it happen, on what object, and under what conditions, if any. And let's talk about all that stuff. All right, so the first thing I do is I click actions. Actions are like, what do I want to have happen? Do I want to change the state of some variable? Like if I have a text box, do I want to change it from like 100 to 2000 or something like that? Do I want to show a layer or hide a layer? Do I want to like jump somewhere? Do I want to play like a video or an audio file? Do I want this to exit the course? Like, what do I want to have happen? Here's like pause timeline, adjust variable. You can execute JavaScript. We're not going to talk about that. But do I want to like submit my quiz results right now? It's important if you're like trying to submit to like SCORM, like do I want to submit them early so that they're in the LMS? All right, so that's my action. So I have to pick like, what do I want to have happen? Now, if I click adjust variable here, it's going to ask me, well, what is my variable? Because I don't have any yet. Here are some built-in ones, but I haven't created a variable yet, so let's not do that. We'll create a variable soon. Let's create a variable in a minute. But I have to pick what I actually want to do. So I could say like play. Oh, I don't have any media either, do I? Yeah, let's just I forgot it's a completely blank file. So what I want to have happen is I'm going to pause the timeline. Where? What? On this slide? Yes, on this slide. When do I want that to have happen? Do I want it to pause when, because you can see the timeline down here. Oh, we can't go into it. Here's the timeline down here for those of you that are new. And a little funky thing about the articulate timeline is even though this says 1 second, I find in reality it's not 1 second. Like more like 3/4 of it or something like that is really 1 second. This is like longer. Weird, odd thing about articulate. Anyway. All right. So we're on this. What are we doing? Oh yeah, we're pausing the timeline. We're pausing the timeline on this slide. When the timeline starts, or do we want to do it when something happens? So for example, like I could say, pause the timeline when the user clicks. Clicks what? Clicks just anything? Clicks the next button? When am I doing it? When is this happening? When some variable changes? Like, so a variable would be like the score, like a text box changes to something. When the timeline starts on this slide. So right now what's going to happen is as I start this slide, it's going to pause right here. It's not going to play the rest of it. It's going to pause right here. So I could do that if like I want to have a button here and say like the user has to click the button for the next thing to play. All right. What are any conditions? We don't have any variables, so there's not really any conditions yet that we can add. Okay. Let's create some variables. Click this little button right here on the side. We've got some variables. I can create some. I'm going to click, I'll call it number. I can make it true, false, text, or a number. We're obviously going to make it a number, and we'll say default 0. All right, so there we go. Name, my number. And let's actually let's just create a little text thing to show you like how you can text box. Oops. There we go. Okay. There we go. We got a text box 1. Text box 1 is 500. Oh, they're going to ask me to change all the states of it, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Okay, so what I can do, so an example of something I could do is I could say like, you know, right now the default value of my number is 0. What I could do is I could create an action that says, or a trigger, that says change state of text box 1 to, I don't have any states built in, so let's actually build some states in this text box. See, I'm going to click my text box, I'm going to click states. Let's see, I'm going to click edit states. Let's create a new state. We'll call this one 1000. Let's change it to 1000. There we go. So we have 500 and 1000. We're done editing the states. Okay, so we are going to say, oops, we don't need to do that. Action, change state of text box 1 to 1000. When do we want this to have happen? When user clicks, let's just say when user clicks text box 1. There's no conditions yet. Conditions would be like, you know, I could say like if my number equals, you know, value 1, or I could say even say like is less than 1 if my number is greater than 0. So that would mean it would only take place if the variable my number was like 0.5, somewhere between 0 and 1. But we're going to get rid of that. All right, so what's going to happen is we are going to change the state of text box 1 to 1000, which is our second state, remember, when the user clicks text box 1. I'm going to click OK. We're going to go to preview this slide. Waiting on a preview. All right, so all we do is we click this, Look at that, it changed. Now it's the stop. Oh, it doesn't want to. There we go. So look, I scroll over my little state, I click it, and it changes to the second state. Really simple, right? Check out my actions, which are right here. All that I did is I changed the state of text box 1 to the other state when the user clicks text box 1. So you can see these triggers are like, fairly useful, pretty easy to work with. You can see it has where it's linked to. Like this trigger is linked to text box 1 up here, object trigger versus a player trigger. You can see my variables are over here to the side. And here's something cool. I can turn triggers on and off by just clicking that little button. That way I can like test it without it playing and then go back and retest it. Let's go back into our triggers. All right, so we've got our action. So we pick, what do we actually want Articulate to do? What do we want to have happen? They make it really easy, but you still need to understand some basic programming logic. So I really feel like a brand new person has a little trouble with these at first, figuring out like the basics of it. But what do you want to have happen? Do we want to adjust a variable, open a file? What do we want to have happen here? We picked our object because we changed the state of a variable there. But I could say like jump to slide. Well, we only have one slide, so I can't say like, just jump to next slide when. When do I want to jump to the next slide? When something happens. What's going to happen? Do we want a variable to change? Do we want the timeline to end? So when timeline ends on, we should probably say this slide. So basically what I just did is I created an action that when this slide is done, it's going to automatically go to the next slide. So jump to slide, next slide, when timeline ends on this slide. Here is my timeline. My timeline's only 5 seconds, and as I said, those seconds are, I can't believe that they're not real seconds, but they're just not. So basically what's going to happen is my timeline's going to play. As soon as it hits here, the user's not going to have to push a button. It's just going to automatically play to the next slide. Oh, did I not save my variable? No, I didn't. So let's just go back. Jump to slide, next slide, when timeline ends on this slide. Click OK. It's going to go to the next slide. We don't have a next slide, so it's not going to do anything if I test it out right now. But that's what would happen. So, the triggers are pretty useful and pretty fun to play with. They add a lot of functionality to Articulate, but they're still really limited to compared to computer programming, like some kind of object-oriented programming language, which what Flash had was ActionScript, 1, 2, and 3.0, where you could literally program anything in there, and in Articulate, you cannot program anything in there. You're very much limited by the piece of software because it's not a full programming language. And one of the things that makes me mad about this is that this language right here, I actually wish they would give you an option to just not use triggers, but actually use the back-end programming language that the software is using, because then I could actually do everything I wanted. Like there are certain things this software doesn't do. Like let's say like I want to adjust the volume. I can't just adjust. I can adjust certain kinds of volume here. Like I can adjust volume, but I can't. What Articulate wants me to do is they actually want me to adjust the volume, like turn volume on, like have a button that says like volume on and off, which sounds great, and I can do it via these triggers, but when I can't do it is when like I'm playing like videos and stuff like that. It doesn't control like the video. What Articulate wants me to do is use where is the, what's it? Why can't I find anything ever when I need to find it? Oh, that's right here. The player. They want me to control my volume right here. So one of the unfortunate things about Articulate is they're very picky about like what they want to control. For example, their player. So like this volume control is where you have to have the volume on and off. The problem is usually when I'm creating something for a client, we never use this skin here. Like we always have the player hidden, like it's gone. Like we don't have a player. Um, so that presents a problem when you want to use these kind of features that are built into the player. That's where triggers should allow you to do that stuff. And unfortunately, they don't let you do it. Like articulate just, it's almost like, you know how like a car, there's something called a governor in a car, which like makes it so like I can set the governor in a car so the car can't go above 60 miles per hour. Articulate's doing the same thing by like blocking their code. So while these triggers are nice and they're great for non-programmers and they allow you to do some very basic things in the piece of software, they have expanded it. It is still very limited. So I just like to bring that up, but it's definitely like, using Articulate itself, I feel like is pretty easy to use. It's no different than PowerPoint. I really think where I start to see like the difference between a good and bad articulate developer is like their ability to create things like a timer and different things like that. Look, anyone can make something look pretty, and that's really a Photoshop skill and a graphic design skill. Um, but to be able, when my client says, hey, we need a timer like tomorrow, to be able to troubleshoot and create things like that is where like, that understanding how to bypass certain things that Articulate has and actually do it is where you like show if you're a good developer or not. Like a good interview question, like someone could show me like this beautiful Articulate portfolio, and I could say to them like, uh, what the portfolio means nothing because I might say to them like, show me how to submit quiz results in a SCORM package or something like that. Like that's the stuff I want to see that you can actually do. I don't care too much about like creating a pretty thing. Like that's the easy part. It's the all that trouble. Like can you troubleshoot the software and like create things that the client wants fast sometimes? I mean that's the reality of it. So anyway, yeah, that's those are the triggers in Articulate. They're pretty easy to work with. They are nice. They do a bunch of neat stuff. It is somewhat limited. I've run into a lot of problems, and I'm always finding workarounds in Articulate for some reason. Um, Lots of workarounds to get things to work with these. And a lot of times I have to create like, just that timer itself that I created was like 5 or 6 different triggers to get it to even work correctly. Just being able to have like one piece of code would make it a lot easier. It starts to get a little messy, like not knowing where things are and how they all fit together. So anyway, yeah, that's it for today. That's my learning live session on triggers, just playing around with them because I've been using them so much in my our development lately, and I'm kind of like the troubleshooting guy. So that's kind of my role on the development side, at least right now in the current 2 or 3 projects that I'm on. So anyway, yeah, that's it. That's it. If you have any questions, as always, please please